A first visit to New York is like meeting a superstar. It's both a place we all recognise and an aspiration. But for all its success, swagger and grandeur, one thing is the same here as it is everywhere else. Men and women are not equal. The law says that at work and school everyone's the same. The reality, though, is different. Women in New York don't have the same economic or political power as men, nowhere near. Nor do they get paid the same for equivalent work. New York's many cultures are vital, uplifting, and all around, but none of them have found a solution to a problem that's in plain sight. Recently, I made a documentary about gender inequality, and it focused on the lives of teenage girls in different parts of the world. Well, some of those girls have come here because, along with some local teenagers, they're going to be taking part in a very special discussion. We're just off to talk about it now. 3 of the 4 teenagers we met have made it to New York, and they're getting to know each other. Lulu's from the UK, Shui Shui's from Lesotho, and Vigdis is from the country ranked as the most equal in the world, Iceland.
I'd like to be treated the same as boys, and I'd like to wear what I want to without anything being expected of me. And I'd like to go where I want, do what I want, wear what I want as well, without anyone saying, no, you can't do that, you're a girl.
A woman is like expected to be like always well dressed and sexy and hot even, but a guy isn't really expected to be that. But when you're a girl, everything is questioned.
There are things I feel that girls can't do that boys are allowed to do because they're boys. I can't really stand up for myself because a lot of people see that as a girl being disrespectful.
Mira is the 4th girl in All That Stands in the Way. She lives in Jordan, and much to everyone's disappointment, most of all hers, a last-minute complication with her visa meant she couldn't get to New York. Well, we introduced Lulu, Shui Shui and Vigdis to 2 local teenagers. Anik's family's from Asia, Nawal's is from India, and both now call New York home. The 5 girls have been invited to take part in the Women in the World Summit at the Lincoln Center in downtown Manhattan. And they're in esteemed company. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and IMF Chief Christine Lagarde are among those speaking. Women in the World is run by Tina Brown, one of America's most famous media figures. It's a glitzy event with a serious agenda.
5 years ago, I decided to start the Women in the World Summit. And why did I decide to do it? It's because I felt that so many voices, such as we hear today, original voices, different kinds of voices, were just not being heard.
Tina Brown and 4 of the delegates at Women in the World have agreed to meet our girls for a special discussion.
Tomi-Ann Roberts. I'm a professor of psychology at Colorado College. I want to talk to these girls about the choices they make in fashion, how they present themselves. I can't wait.
I'm Meredith Perry, founder and CEO of UBeam, and if I can provide any insight into how to be a female leader, at least in American culture, then I would love that opportunity.
Hi, I'm Layla Shakely, and I'm a MIPster and a STEMinist, that is a Muslim hipster and a female in STEM. I would urge these ladies to pursue their goals and totally ignore any limitations that they feel are in their surrounding environments and just get it.
My name is Ka Wala. I'm from Cameroon in Central Africa, and I am a political leader. I'm really interested in hearing how these young women are going to shape the future, how they're going to define women in the future, because that's who they are.
It's a unique opportunity for these 5 girls to seek advice and insight from women with great experience of seeing what stands in the way and overcoming it. It's also a chance for the women to reflect on the choices they make in their lives. The conversation begins with one of the most fundamental questions in the search for equality.
Do you think that women and men are different? And if so, how are they different?
Well, if I can jump in here, I do think there is one difference that I observe, if you can say there's a difference between the sexes, and that is that Men tell you what happened, women tell you what really happened. Women are really good at understanding the kind of subtext and the emotional content of a situation, not just the facts, but what was that person thinking, feeling. It makes them very valuable very often in a business situation or in a political situation, because they understand what's going on in the room as they look around. If you can make that generalization. Plenty of women who are very insensitive too, but
I guess we could ask the question of whether that's nature or nurture, and I think I might fall on the side of saying that women gain this skill because we're in charge of caring for small people, and that maybe it's our responsibility to bring men on board with this kind of emotional intelligence.
I view people a little bit differently and think that each person, and view each person as an individual, and don't generally like to group or generalize any kind of person. And so I think that generalizing a gender is a dangerous thing and can get us in trouble. And while biological differences between men and women may manifest themselves slightly differently in each gender, I think that each person has a personality that takes shape through many different things and not just what kind of chromosomes you have.
We have to understand that we've constructed societies where men have power. They have power in our families, they have power in our companies, they have power in societies. And people who have power, they don't give it up that easily. They don't buy into they can buy into theoretically we're all individuals and everybody should be given the same opportunity. But in reality, if I've got privileges, I have a tendency to want to keep them.
My mom had said earlier when we were talking about this with her, she had said that women are better at taking care of the children, but I personally think that be it a man or a woman, it just depends on the type of person they are, like the personality. There are some men who can nurture a lot better than a lot of women, but there are women who can nurture as well. So I just think it basically just depends on the personality.
Some men don't get the opportunity, do they, to be able to be nurturers?
No, they don't.
And the judgment against them in the workplace, if they do make that choice, might be very profound. So the judgment against their masculinity.
Like even if women have, a really successful career with, their own company or like they're a political activist, they are still expected to have children and to have a family. And if they don't, and there's something wrong with them, it's a shame to not have children.
You're absolutely right, and it's not just about being judged on gender. As women, we're often put in binaries. You're sexy or you're smart. You're ambitious or you're a homemaker. You're a scientist or you're a fashionista. I could probably be all of those things. I don't really know what I would explain myself as, but I think what's most important is that you have the decision to do what it is that you want to do and the agency to really make your own decisions. And in that vein, be really cautious against using these binaries to define yourself and define your own value.
Yeah, I think that especially in my school, I think the girls have to work a lot harder because they have to prove their worth before they're accepted into anything. Like in any situation, it's always, oh, but she's a girl. Like she has to prove herself before she's accepted into that situation. And that really brings me to the question of what does success mean for women? And is it different from what success is for a man?
It is tiring though. I think I hear a lot of you young women saying, we have to work twice as hard. And now with the increasing all these Western standards of sexy beauty, I was saying, you have to bring home the bacon, you have to fry it up in the pan, and you have to look sexy doing it. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. So if feminism is about choices and having the maximum number of choices, that's all well and good. But if the array of choices seems mind-boggling, how do you stake your claim on the one that's yours?
This does seem to be one of the defining issues for women everywhere. Biggest problem for us, I think, in the West is that we're so far flung from one another's families that women are just exhausted because they're trying to uphold their families and uphold their jobs and try to meet all these standards. And there really is no one to step in when things go wrong. I know that in my job, when I had a 2-year-old child at the time I took over as editor of The New Yorker, and I could not have done that job if my mother had not been willing to come to New York and live with us. Because I knew that I didn't want to be a less good mother.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I know that when my mum had me, she was still at uni, and 4 days after me, she went and took her exam for her graduation. And I think that like without my grandma being there, she wouldn't have been able to balance that. So like family support is so important when you're bringing up a child and having a family.
To prove yourself as a woman, you have to have an amazingly successful job and be able to balance your family life. I find that expectation so irritating. Like, why isn't there any understanding between people that, you know, we can't do everything, that sometimes we are human, that we get stressed out, that it's difficult for us to try and micromanage every little detail of our lives and our children and our husband and our parents and everyone else.
After having lived in Reykjavik in Iceland for about 15 years now, I've come to realize that for women there are a few obstacles you have to overcome to your way to success. And I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your obstacles and how you overcame them.
So I'd recently put this music video together. I'm like in science, you know. I did this for fun with my friends, with a group we call Muslim hipsters. Just like, you know, a celebration of our style, because I love fashion. And it ended up causing a really serious global uproar, you know, good and bad. It was an awesome opportunity to talk about identity, but at the same time I realized that I'd received all this attention just for not being standard. And I'm not sure who wrote the rules for standard.
One of the obstacles that I faced, I developed a new type of technology, and when I presented this technology to the world as a female, young, blonde, non-engineer, I was faced with serious opposition, and I can't say that this is because I faced opposition because I was a woman, but I can tell you that, or I have a hunch that if I were like a white male in a hooded sweatshirt that looked like a geek, or if I were an older dude in a lab, that people would probably believe that the thing that I've created was probably more valid. But yeah, in my experience, it's just been proving that what I've created is actually real has been my biggest obstacle.
Same obstacle, generalizations.
Yep. I think I'll probably just say almost the same thing. I remember when I went off to graduate school, I was shocked, of course, that Stanford had made a mistake to accept me to go to graduate school. There must be some error here. And I resolved to wipe the smile off my face. I thought, okay, if I smile too much, they're not going to take me seriously as an intellectual. But what I realized, the obstacle was really not me smiling, the obstacle was myself. And the awareness when I stepped in a room that there were stereotypes about me, which if I smiled would be confirmed. And then I was thinking so hard and I was doing so much work to overcome that stereotype that I finally had to say, you know what, Tommy Ann, you're a smiler.
When I know myself as a professional editor and journalist, I have frequently been written about as if, you know, all my contribution ever was like promotion or hype, and yet, you know, when I was at the New Yorker, for instance, I brought and hired all these brilliant writers who are all there today, but somehow it's always about, well, she was, you know, created publicity or whatever, and I'm thinking, actually, I don't believe that men are written about in that kind of way. I mean, your intellectual contribution does tend to get reduced, and your so-called decorative or promotional aspects are all, you know, considered, as opposed to the actual content of the work that you did. And I hear women complain about that a lot.
In my campaign run, when I had, really, we ran the best campaign in terms of content, in terms of a political program and a vision for Cameroon. And my headscarf got more attention than our economic policies that we were proposing. But I was prepared for that, and I just kept hammering and hammering and hammering. I wrote, I was on radio, I was on TV, and I made them take me seriously.
Yeah. For me, back home in Lesotho, whenever I'm in class, I feel like whenever I want to express my opinion, I should always expect somebody to say something. I'm always constantly thinking about, okay, even if I know that what I'm saying is right, I know there's somebody who's going to counter what I'm saying. And at home, I feel like I can't stand up to my parents
if I feel like if I was a boy, I could do that and I wouldn't get into trouble for doing that. And I would just like to know if you encounter such problems.
Well, I'm on the New York City math team. And I was talking to Meredith about this, and the ratio of boys to girls is around like 8 to 1. And a lot of I think I'm just as good. I'm better. I feel like I'm better than a lot of the boys in the team. My ability is better, at least. But I feel a lot of times boys will come up to me and say, you know, you're good at math for a girl, right? And so I feel like I'm put up to this standard where I'm just not good. I can't be simply good. I'm just good enough for a girl. And I look to a guy, and whenever someone gives them a compliment, no one says you're good enough. You're good for a guy. You're just good, right? So what the heck is that right there? And also, you know, I feel like when I talk a lot. I have a lot of opinions. So like whenever I'm in class, I don't think twice. Sometimes I say whatever I want to say, and a lot of times, you know, the boys in the class will say, you know, oh, stop talking, go back to the kitchen, or go make me a sandwich, and you know, it's not as bad as what Lulu gets. It's the tone of like this gender discrimination is like a lot subtler in you know, at least in New York City for me. But I feel like, you know, it's just frustrating. Like, why is that there?
For me in Iceland, I used to be like that. I used to just not think twice to say something. If I think I have the right answer in class, I just raise my hand and I say it. But now I'm not like that at all, because for the last 4 years, always when I open my mouth and say something, somebody, often a guy, says something like, if it's wrong, they tell me to shut up or something negative. So it's just like my confidence has just gotten lower, and I've stopped doing it.
I mean, when I'm in class and if I feel like I have the right answer and let's say I'm wrong, the boys in my class, not the girls, will put me down and be like, oh, you're so stupid, what's wrong with you? Why would you say that? You're wrong. And it's like, and because I'm a girl, they attack me. They don't attack, like, you know, each other as much. And it's really irritating because I can't, you know, show any like stereotypically masculine personality traits. I can't be dominant because they'll just put me down again. And if I am too dominant, then they'll be like, oh, you know, she's really tight and whatever. She's too bossy, whatever. Don't talk to her. She's weird and all these kind of things. I have to always prove myself, and like my femininity is like the thing that brings me down in their eyes.
I went into the class and it was me and another girl there and about 11 boys, 12 boys, because the rest of the girls weren't in. And the teacher went out of the room for about 5 minutes, and we were just working, doing our revision, and one of the boys went, oh look, there's only 2 girls in here, and another one shouted out, gang rape.
They see that as a joke, but for a girl sitting in that classroom, that wasn't a joke, that was something that is a reality for so many people. And yes, it's a classroom and it was never going to happen, but for them to say that makes you feel so powerless. But like another example was, I said something in class that I'm very opinionated, and it was a philosophy class, and I said something that not everyone agreed with, but me and my friend, who also is a girl, were like discussing it with the rest of the class, who again were mainly boys, and they said to her that your mouth's only good for one thing, so shut it, because that's not happening now. And I got so angry at this that the teacher again wasn't in the classroom at this point, but I said some very strong words to him, and it kind of made him go quiet. But it's the fact that boys think that they have, I don't know what gives them the confidence to say these things to girls that are so demeaning and so wrong. But what are you supposed to do in that situation? Because sometimes you can't, you feel threatened, so threatened to fight back.
I very much can identify with everything I'm hearing, everything. I can remember sitting in big editorial conferences and not having the courage to speak my mind, where all these guys are going around throwing their weight around, and I'm thinking, I know that fact, I know this, why can't I speak up? And I think women do suffer from that confidence. I would say that the best way, you have to just win. You just get on with your own project and focus on that and remind yourself that the best way to shut them up is to win. And all of the young women on this panel are so extraordinary. I see that you're doing that already. And don't be downcast, because the best answer is to streak right by them.
I completely agree. You know, whenever I'm faced with any situation like yours, whether it's, you know, in business or in technology or in a specific meeting where somebody says something like I'm sure you're a nice girl, but I completely agree with you, Tina. I think that success is the best revenge, you know. And if you just continue forward and you continue on your path and you continue believing in what you believe in, and if you know what you think is right, then ultimately that will speak for itself, and your success will speak for itself. And hopefully, as societies all around the world progress, they'll see your success, and then they'll happen to see that a woman was behind that success.
I want to say a couple things about the nature of the demeaning. The nature of the demeaning comments is usually your sexuality. And another thing I think we have to do as young women cooperating with older women is to really start fighting this culture of hypersexualization. And do it through social media. Organize yourselves together. Say, this is not the definition of who I am. It's very difficult, obviously, in the moment. You're concerned about your personal safety. You're concerned about getting home. Once you're home, get online. Start blogging. Start social media networking about how wrong it is to define girls and women solely by their sexuality.
I think you have to develop the skills to gain your space. So Lulu, it sounds like you're already doing that, because your comeback is important. It is important that you stand up and you fight for yourself, and sometimes you have to say to somebody, shut up. The other thing, final thing I would say is stand up for each other. This also happens because as women, you know, and especially as very young women, when it happens, you know, all the other girls, we don't want to, you know, we don't want to be labeled too bossy or too, you know, and we want guys to like us, right? You're at an age where you want guys to like you. So I think, but I think it's important that you stand up for that other girl and you say, you know, don't do that. Why are you doing that? You know,
it can feel easier to stand up for your friend than your own self.
Yes.
Use
yes.
that sisterhood.
Yeah. But then again, I have often tried that in my school, standing up and saying something to the guy, but then they always just say, "What? You can't take a joke? What? You don't think I'm funny?
You're a joke."
Yeah, and tell them
You're
it's not a joke.
In the mirror.
It's not funny. You know, and I think maybe also another thing for young women, you have to learn to not laugh at that stuff. Yeah. Because sometimes what we do as women to sort of slide by is that we kind of, no, it's not, if it threatens somebody, if it makes somebody feel really uncomfortable, it's not funny.
One of the things that I really hate that I face is how people say, oh, boys will be boys. Like, how is that an excuse for that sort of behavior? It's really inappropriate. And if I say something like that, no one says girls will be girls. No one says that.
There's no such thing.
It's like, oh, that wasn't a very nice thing to do. You probably shouldn't do that. You should probably stay quiet. It's like, I feel like people are just putting us down and just letting our male counterparts just get away with everything. So like, how do we battle that?
Can I say a last thing on just popular culture also? Because I think what happens is that I think if there's one thing that I would stop today that I think would make a huge difference in women's lives, especially girls, is music videos. I think the way that women are portrayed in those videos and what they're doing and the way, you know, the relationship between them and men, and when you're sitting there and you're watching that with guys and all of you are laughing, then they think they can turn around and treat you the way that you have both just sort of agreed is okay by watching that video and listening to that music. You know, I refuse to listen to music that calls me a hoe or a bitch. Yep. It's not acceptable. I don't want it on the radio when I'm in the car. I don't want it, you know, around me. So I think we need to be a little firmer in putting the walls.
The girls want to talk about lobola. This is a custom in Lesotho where a man's family gives money or cows to a woman's family ahead of marriage.
Do you think that's right then? What? By
that culture.
Taking out the cows thing.
Yeah, it's culture.
Yes.
Then what can you see? Because you are marrying that someone. You can't
No,
even take
but-
someone's child for free. Can you?
No.
You must pay.
So you have to pay.
Okay.
So it's basically like a business. If I have a daughter and I'm gonna give my daughter to you, I better be compensated some way. I have to.
Yeah. For the
So
use of your
bring me money, bring me the cows.
I find this really disrespectful. It's like it's like you're buying me.
I told my parents that I feel like if that was to happen to me, I'd feel like I was getting sold or bought. I was just like a piece of a property. I was property. My father said, obviously it's an option. Like we can choose whether or not to do it. But he said if we don't do it, then that poses a lot of problems. A lot of consequences will be suffered due to us not doing that. So I just wanted to know if your families have questioned any choice or all the choices that you've made.
Well, I very much admire the fact you're so independent-minded. You've already expressed that you won't do it. And what you're expressing is how generationally things are beginning to change in many parts of the world, and you yet have a father and a mother who are thinking one way, and the younger generation are already moving away from that. That often does create great conflict, which is why we see things like honor killings happening and so on, because there's a lot of conflict very often about that.
You're all describing how difficult it is, but I'm hearing how well you are negotiating your way already and gaining, gaining your space. It's very impressive. So the fact that you brought this up with your parents, you've already, it's like you've already pushed the wall back because you're having a conversation about it. And I would encourage you, you've described your extended family, somebody in there, or probably several people, are going to support you in that conversation. So find those people and continue the conversation. I think that what you're doing is actually shaping culture, changing society, so keep on in that conversation, and your father is going to hear you.
But I think it's so much more than just the men. I think it's, the female community, which should be a second family to us, isn't very supportive of our choices all the time. And yesterday, the five of us were talking, and we said that most of us are closer to our boyfriends and guy friends, not actual boyfriends, than our girlfriends, because there's a level of competitiveness that comes in this female community where we don't always support each other, and even in the media, females are saying horrible things to each other, whether that be a campaign tactic or not, it's not right. And I think that we pick up on these things, and while creating change for ourselves is a very individual thing, like we need to own our identity, and we need to say we're here, and this is who we are. We're not going to change. It's also a very scary thing, and we need support from, I think we need to call out to our sisters and say, let's hold hands, let's do this together. Like there's so many things that are stacked against us. Why are we not supporting each other?
Very good message.
I think the media that Ka talks about has accomplished that very handily. The media has convinced you to compete with one another for sexualized attention from men. It's got to stop. And it is one of the most significant changes I've noticed in my career as a professor. Young female students saying, I'm closer to my guy friends than to my girlfriends. And that has happened just in the last 10 years or so. And we need to take that back. I'm very moved by what you just said.
They always say these games is only for boys. They are not good for girls.
What do you think about that?
I don't think it's fair, because there's a lot of girls can play much better than the boys. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wish if I were a boy for these things.
So in the documentary, there's a part where Mira, the girl from Jordan, her father is asked, why are your children treated differently, like your daughter and your son? And he says, because it's not that I treat them differently, it's that they're both equal but different. Like, for example, in my experience, I know that my mother has always said, if you want to have a job, you can, but I would prefer you not have it, because you have to be a homemaker and truly take care of your family, and that's a really big responsibility. But she's always saying your husband should be the one to provide for your family. And I understand this sort of ideal, but growing up in New York, in this metropolitan area that I'm in love with, I have this, I want that, you know, Upper East Side, that Friends like kind of lifestyle where I'm sitting at Central Park having coffee, going to work, and still like taking care of my children somehow. What's your take on that sort of idea? Do you agree with it or disagree? Do you think it's like acceptable or it's absolute rubbish?
I think we need, as people in general, to be tolerant of different cultural traditions, but also identify which of those cultural traditions are, frankly, simply regressive and against women's human rights as we know them today. And on the second category, you have to push back, because in the same way that Shushu is very bravely doing with her father, she's saying, it may be a tradition, but I'm not going to do it because this is actually against my own freedom.
I recently read this lovely line, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. The mark of misogyny is not how much or how little a woman wears, but how much it matters what she wears. And I think we can say that about so many cultural traditions, right? That we need to start thinking about how much it matters whether or not a woman must partake in a particular cultural tradition in order to gain any rights at all. And that's where the conversation should be.
Going back to like Shushu's comment about family, like whose responsibility is it to, you know, start this new way of thinking? Because it's all about, you know, this new mindset. Is it our job? Is it our job? Is it the previous generation? Is it my mother? Is it my grandmother? Is it my father? Like who? I feel like someone needs to. Everyone likes the idea of this, but I feel like no one's doing anything. So.
But I think you are doing it. You know, I think it's the responsibility.
You don't realize how much.
Yeah, you're doing it, and I think it's the responsibility of whoever feels it strongly enough. Because once you feel it strongly, you find the strength to stand up and to you know, and to voice your difference of opinion.
I would also caution you not to be afraid to be different. Sure, equal but different might mean something, but is there really something wrong with being different? I think the important point there is that you define what kind of different you want to be.
So this is a bit random, but I've been really thinking about the tradition where the woman, when she gets married, takes their husband's name. And in my opinion, if I didn't like their name, I wouldn't take their name. Like, and that's just, I don't see it as the tradition thing. Like, if I preferred their name to my current surname, then I would take it. But if I didn't like their surname, there's no way that that's coming into my name. But like, I don't know, that tradition just for me, it just hinders women. It completely, like, it's like you're being owned by your husband, and I would never take it because of the tradition. I just think there's something really fundamentally wrong with that tradition still being upheld. But what's your view on that?
Well, I love that. That's a good way to look at it. I mean, imagine being called Angelina Jolie and changing it to Angelina Pitt. I don't think anybody would want to do that.
It sounds wrong. Exactly. It sounds
exactly
wrong.
Right. I say hang on to your own name. You know, I love my husband to death, but I hang on to my name. Hang on to your name. It is still who you are. You can always make it the middle name. Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's okay too. But I would say hang on to your name. Hang on to it.
I completely agree. I like my name and I plan on keeping it. And I think another interesting question is even if the woman plans on keeping it, how come the children end up with the man's name? And you know, that's again tradition, but I mean, should it be that way or?
Do you feel like you identify with your, like, you want to keep it because you truly identify with your last name?
Well, why should I change it? It's who I am. So what's the point? I like it, you know?
Also, Anique Wong is not the same person as Anique, you know, whoever I marry's last name. You know, it doesn't say the same. Like, what I've done as Anique Wong is not put into that. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. My grandfather sat me on his knee and said, "The Roberts family name ends with you," because there were only granddaughters. And I remember being really stunned by that comment. And I said then and there, I'm keeping my name. Of course, my daughters have their father's last name.
I want to keep my name, but back home, a lot of people, especially guys that are my age, they tell me that they're not going to change their names. They're not going to allow their women to keep their names, their wives to keep their names. They want their wives to have their surnames. So I don't want to change my surname because I'm proud of it. I really love it. So I I don't know what I'll do.
So we'll find a way.
I'm going to give you a way out based on tradition, because you got to make tradition work for you when it does. In African tradition, we never changed our names as women. It came with colonization. We never changed our names. Just go back 2 generations and you will find that your grandmother, your great-grandmother, she never changed her name. So since we generally don't like the colonizer in Africa and we don't like to do things that the colonizer brought, just tell them that, you know, I'm really against this kind of colonial thing and I want to keep my name.
There are many ways to be a revolutionary. You must always remember that. Seems to me that Shushu's quiet pushback against her parents, maybe it's not so quiet, that's being a revolutionary. So we don't have to be waiting in the streets or being arrested or, you know, or being so loud necessarily. That you can do that too, but you can also be a quiet revolutionary every day.
So you think just talking about it is enough?
I think saying no is always in many cultures being a revolutionary. Like defining your terms is being a revolutionary.
But I also think that it is important. I'm so happy to hear your generation asking that question, because I think one of the things that my generation fears is that you all feel like, oh, we've got it, we've got the rights and so on, we don't need to fight anymore. And I think that the interesting thing that's happening today is that we have lots of groups, men included, who feel like this is not right. What we have constructed here is not okay. And I am all for, that's my job on a daily basis, you know, formal revolutions. If that's what you feel is needed, do it.
And you have the power of social media, which we didn't have in our generation. You have the power of social media.
Crowdsourced revolution now.
Yeah.
And remember, sisterhood is powerful. Sisterhood is powerful. Join each other.
And I think beyond like massive, even putting on massive events or doing things as groups, if you just proceed as you want to and don't consider yourself in a box, then it's hard to stay in that box. And so don't ever ask permission, just continue forward and do what you want to do. And if everybody collectively does that, then that is a revolution in itself.
During the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson said, the revolution started in the hearts and the minds of the people. And if it's in your heart and if it's in your mind, if you just speak out, if you just make changes in your life, tell people like how you feel, I feel like that in itself is a revolution. If not in the community, it's within you, and you can spread it to your female friends.
Yeah, like anything that you don't agree with in your life, change it, or at least try. Because if you don't try, then nothing's ever going to be done. And if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, just don't stop trying. Like, that's all we can do.
She's just a girl and she's on fire, hotter than a fantasy, lonely like a highway.
It's been quite something to see how quickly the girls have got along. Their common experiences are a useful reminder that we all share much more than we might think, and that we see gender inequality as someone else's problem at our peril. New York's skyline tells a story of ambition, success, and of obstacles overcome. As our girls head home, they understand better all that stands in the way, and also perhaps how to try and take that on. I've every faith in them.